Okay, this is Patrick Smith, broadcast from the Witch House, my pirate signal, originating from the rafters and wall spaces of the demonic place. Um, I am just testing out, again, proof of concept. I'm going to upload this to my YouTube channel. I am probably going to make it private, to be honest. Um, I think I'm going to change that's actually a good idea. I'm going to change the title of the other one. Make it just test, because the audio on that is unlistenable. I learned an important tip, which is when you have a microphone, make sure you're using it. Um, Hopefully this is a little less high-pitched whine-y. But you know what? It's a learning experience. And frankly, right now the whole point for me is to overcome the cognitive barriers to doing what it is I want to do. I'm not worried about the technical proficiency. I assume that will come in time. I just want to be able to do it. I believe I might have mentioned once, maybe, that I was abused as a child, and they instill a lot of habits in you. Not healthy habits, but, habits. And one of the big ones is don't talk to anybody about this, don't share anybody about this. So it's been really hard for me to come forth and actually put my voice in there. And, I'm trying to do it. And I think that really doing that matters a lot more than getting it right. Like, I can always learn. But if I don't actually start putting stuff up and posting it, then I'm never going to do anything with the knowledge, even if I gain it. I got the clock on here. It says 2 minutes and 12. I'm going to try and do 10 minutes just sort of off the top of my head. That seems like a good place to do it. And yeah, we're going to see what happens. I guess I'm going to post this too and make it public. I don't really know. I'm not going to advertise this anymore because, and obviously I should not put my elbows on the table when my webcam is on a very shaky stand. I am less inspired today. We'll see how that works. But my brain works very differently when I'm inspired. I'm a lot more entertaining, I think. I've been trying to find disadvantages to the use of medical marijuana, and I haven't had a lot of luck. I don't want to be a stoner. I hate being a stoner. Like, I was a stoner in high school for a while, and I hated it. Like, I never stopped using it. What is that? They say it lowers your IQ for like 2 weeks. It's not a big deal. But no pot user ever stopped using for 2 weeks. So it's kind of like you lose a couple of IQ points from the time you start smoking until you stop. And I actually, turns out, I don't miss those points that much. I mean, frankly, I may have a fairly functional brain, high functioning, but that's not the same thing as saying that I do stuff with it. Um, what else? What else? I think that we are in the middle of an invasion by a mental virus, sort of a mimetic agent, if that makes sense, which comes to us from aliens, cephalopods, I think. That's my theory. That's what I'm selling you, okay? Mental virus launched at us by cephalopodic telepathic aliens. It's a telepathic virus, in a sense. Most of the humans who get it aren't all that telepathic. Humans are low-level telepathic. It's not anything impressive. We can tell what other people are thinking, generally by just looking at them, interpreting the body cues, but frankly, there are some times when the flow of information exceeds that. One of the things I've mentioned about or I've discovered about what you would call the supernatural. I don't have a good better name for it. is that it often hides behind an uncertainty barrier. In other words, what it represents is sort of overlays of other realities, other worlds that are slightly different to our own, but not that different. And these overlays come easiest in places that are not claimed in a metaphorical sense by anyone. Yeah, abandoned houses, woods in the middle of the night. The more people who are putting a frame of reference on something, the harder it is for that thing to be whatever it is. Which is why, if you're in front of an audience of millions, generally you're going to have to obey the laws of reality. I mean, you can perform murders live on screen in movies. They have done that. Like, I don't know if that's a burst for everybody, but there have been movies that have featured actual murders, and because it's a movie, millions of people have seen it. Nobody actually noticed it. It's just another horrifying reality, another horrifying aspect of the world that you live in. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I might be crazy. It's a conspiracy theory. I know that there's a lot of weird shit out there, and I know that there's a lot of people who aren't behaving in any sense rationally, and they can get pretty extreme. They can get very extreme, and you're kind of like saying to yourself, "Well, nobody would do that. That's crazy." It's like, yeah, it is crazy. That's why the crazy people are the ones doing it. I mean, child molestation is a very simple place to start. Everybody knows that happens. There's not really a lot of confusion about it, or I mean, if you say that, like, oh, there are child molesters among the very richest and most powerful people in the country. And it's like, yes, but there are also child molesters among, like, everybody in the country. They're pretty ubiquitous at this point, although thankfully they're a relatively low percentage at this time. It's still like about 1 billion times higher than it should be. We don't rape children naturally. Like, that is literally a response to some very specific and very toxic environmental conditions. And these days, everybody's doing it. It's more than a little bit weird. We've lost our soul in a very real sense. I would call the soul sort of the faculty for self-awareness. Although, really, that's more of a tag than it is a definition. It's the part of you that experiences. So when you have a thought, it's the thing that has the thought. And it doesn't think in and of itself. There's thinking going on, and it kind of like lays claim to it. But honestly, the pure soul, it's like a lens through which light shines. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? It's clear like glass. Think about it like this. Your mind is a movie projector, right? And it's shooting out this ray, this light. And the light is sort of your experience of life, if that makes sense. And then it hits a screen. And in this metaphor, the screen would represent reality. So in other words, you've got the soul, which is generating awareness, and it is beaming that awareness out through the brain, through the body, out into the world. And where it lands and creates a story, creates a narrative, meaning in our lives, that would be the equivalent of the movie screen. In that metaphor, our thoughts are sort of things that are floating around in the air, like smoke in the air of the movie theater. And the soul doesn't really like think. Like it's tied to cognition. There's a place in our cognition where the soul sort of interfaces with the lower order. So you can have cognitive processes that are farther from the spiritual aspect and others that, but it's not a cognitive process itself. It just impacts them, I guess, informs some of them, not all of them, but some of them are informed by like sort of a spiritual presence. And honestly, like the part of your brain that does moral reasoning and value-based reasoning, like that's your soul. But the point is, like, you know, if you've got like a Wall Street lawyer, like he still does moral reasoning, a sociopath, right? They still do moral reasoning. It's just not good moral reasoning. Like the sociopath believes that everybody's predators, right? It's all sharks, right? So what's the law of the shark? Well, the law of the shark is the biggest guy eats. And they live their lives by that moral code. In other words, like even a sociopath who's going around fucking people over and killing people and stuff like that, he is behaving according to the moral law of the universe as he understands it. He just has a very bad understanding. One would say damaged understanding, like his brain's incapable of doing those kinds of calculations, processes. The thing where you recognize something is right or wrong. I don't know what you call that. It's like it's not really a reasoning thing. It's more like it's just a recognition. Your soul is really good at that. And it's very useful to have, honestly. I guess that kind of goes without saying. I'm very much in favor of souls. People should have souls. When they talk about people, like, and then this is kind of like, I think, a new thing. I heard somebody mention this on YouTube. And it was saying that there were some people who just didn't imagine anything. And they're like, well, when you're standing in line, what are you thinking? They're like, I'm thinking that I'm standing in line. And they literally have no imagination. That's not normal. It's normal for some people to have very little imagination. That happens all the time. Like, and it's like any other faculty. Some people are very strong, some people aren't. Some people are big, some people are small. Some people imagine a hell of a lot, and some people don't imagine very much at all. But having someone who doesn't imagine anything is something that you should really only see like in the victims of extremely traumatic experiences. And it's commonplace nowadays. It's all over the place. These people have damaged spiritual faculties. They're suffering from brain damage that makes it, how do I put this? It alters their cognition in a way that it involves interfacing with the soul. So like the kinds of reasoning that happen on a spiritual level, they're still there. They're just not accessed. They're not connected to anything. They're not connected to any of the other thought process or any of the other sort of cognitive nodes in your mental landscape. I'm making up all these terms, by the way. I don't really... I assume that there's an academic language to talk about this kind of stuff, but I don't know if there is. I just, I have a consciousness, so I've been examining it. User's perspective, right? I should make a manual, user's manual. Yeah, cognition's pretty neat. You can do a lot of weird stuff with it. I've gone pretty far, but like I said, I was tortured as a kid, and that I would not recommend it, but it opens up certain doorways. If you can survive it intact, if you can recover from it, your mind gains a lot of flexibility. You lose a lot, but you can recover most of it. It's possible to recover most of what you lose to trauma. And the stuff that you can't recover, price of growing old, Price of growing old. The soul is not... it's not atomic. We think of it as atomic. We think of the soul as like a tiny little ball of light, if that makes sense. In that it is perfect and imperturbable, but it isn't. It's the Buddhists have a word for it. They say skanda. As skanda, that translates as heap. And I think the most accurate way of describing this concept is imagine a pile of dirty laundry, right? Like, if you take a sock out of that pile of dirty laundry, it's still the same pile, right? But if you take out every piece of clothing in that pile and add in all new clothing, then it's not the same pile of clothing, which is weird because it kind of has an identity. Now, our minds generate this. That's a classic mistake in modern philosophy. It's like, at what point, if you remove the table one molecule at a time, at what point does it stop being a table? Well, when you stop calling it a table. It's not like you ask the table what it is and it responds, I am a table. Table doesn't have any fucking opinion. The universe doesn't have any opinion about whether or not that's a table. We have that opinion. Now, if you want to examine human consciousness and try and figure out why we recognize one thing as a table and a half-dissolved piece of wood as a not table, like, that's a good question, but that has nothing to do with reality. That's up here. That's how we organize shit. And the soul is a lot like that. It's a conglomeration of stuff, in the same way that your body is a conglomeration of cells. I like to think, this is it, okay, if you really want to understand what the soul is, imagine a character in a book, and then they make a movie, and they managed to get that character exactly right in the movie. It's like different dialogue, and obviously it's a different medium, but somehow that character, the essence of that character, really shines through. That's a soul. And yes, characters do have souls. It's very, very rudimentary. It would be, I don't know. It would be like saying that Frog has intelligence. It's like it does, but it's not going to be solving any math equations. It's a very primary, like, and souls are not that hard. I mean, like, obviously human souls are exceptional. Exceptional. We have, in a certain sense, you could say that we have evolved to have highly developed souls. Like the whole neural architecture, the body, the way that we interface with the world around us in a physical sense. It's all, you could describe it as focusing primarily on the functionality of the soul. You could also describe it as focusing on the functionality of the brain, and that's a lot easier to prove and a lot simpler. But I almost think that it would be accurate to say that our brains exist sort of as a side effect of our souls. So self-awareness, the faculty for self-awareness. It's hard to define. It involves creativity, it involves imagination, it involves a sense of what's right and wrong. And I don't just mean like, oh, I shouldn't steal. I mean like, hey, we could take this character and make him gay. And it's like, no, that's a bad idea. Like, that's a spiritual faculty, right? The part of you that says, like, no, that's awful, or that's really great. It just happened to me at some point in time when I realized, like, that's why, and this was way back. This was, like, back in the 90s when there were still good movies being made. But I realized, like, that's why that's why so many bad movies get made, because the people who are actually making the decisions about which movie to make or not, they don't have any souls. They literally can't tell the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. And I kind of suspect a lot of them. I'm sure that there are producers who have souls. Like, I'm not part of the industry. I don't know. Hollywood in general seems like a place where a person with a soul is, there's not that many of them. But I could be wrong. But yeah, the point is that the same faculty that makes those people so good at business is the same faculty that makes them completely unable to tell the difference between a bad movie and a good movie, which is why a lot of bad movies got greenlit. And in why a lot of shit just gets made, It's like, in one version you have a guy with a robot head, in the other version it's a guy in a spaceship, and to a producer it's like they can't really tell the difference. Like, I like to say, like, creativity is not, your imagination is not really that hard. You just generate a lot of random stuff. But if you were to say, like, okay, sci-fi with wizards, like, if you're listening to that and you're like, oh yeah, no, that's a brilliant idea, then it's like, yeah, that's creativity, right? Like, George Lucas was like, oh yeah, no, I can do something with that. And that's, like, it's this part of us that knows a good idea when it hears one. In addition to all the other things. And I want to point out, like, those people who are like, oh yeah, no, I don't imagine things. Like, they can't tell. They can't tell a good idea from a bad one. All right, I've been on for 20 minutes, so it is, 19, but it is time for me to go. This has been Patrick Smith, broadcasting my pirate signal from inside the walls of the Witch House. I wish you all good night, and I hope when I upload this, it doesn't have audio effects that cause people to bleed from their ears.